Welcome back to another tier list. The last one was so popular I couldn't help myself and I thought I had to do another one. This time we're going to be looking at the Season 8 1v1 solo ranked maps. Oof, that's a tongue twister. I'll try and say that 5 times fast. So I thought it'd be really interesting now that the season's kind of over. I played a ton of matches, or a ton for me at least, and I wanted to just sort of look at them and see which ones I liked and which ones I didn't like. Now, before we continue, that one has to be blue. The bottom tier always has to be the Mongol colours because that's the one that we hate the most, or at least I do. When we're starting this one, I think like the majority of players or most people that I know, I don't really enjoy playing water or hybrid. I'm not saying it's bad, it's just not for me. I just prefer the standard land maps. I'm not a big fan of all the fishing shenanigans. So in the bottom tier, in the blue, it's going to have to be 4 Lakes, Mongolian Heights, and Socotra. I know Socotra isn't a water map, but it's just a bit of a meme. It's just, I don't really think it's the sort of thing. I want to play like a proper game. I don't want to just kind of just try and spam somebody that's literally 2 seconds away from my face. It's not the style I like to play. So I put Socotra in the water category, and that's where they stay on my veto list. Now these 3 are actually the ones that I have banned at the moment, so I thought we'd get those ones out of the way straight away because I haven't even played on them, to be perfectly honest. Now, to the top of the pile goes my absolute all-time favourite map, Lipany. I love it. I know some of the spawns can be really janky, I know they can be really random, but I just think it's really interesting. Every game's that little bit different. There's loads of berries, which is really good. Obviously I play Byzantine, so that's really good for me, but sometimes you just get a crazy one where it's all cliffs and your opponent walls it up super easily and then the game's no fun, but it forces you to scout. You never know what the whole map's going to look like, so you really do have to investigate. I even played a game the other day where one of the sacred sites was closed off in a cliff and the 2 openings of the cliff were completely closed by wood lines, so without chop throughs that sacred site was basically completely off limits. So I kind of love the fact that sacred sites then is off the menu and you have to do something else, and I just think that's really cool. So Lipany is always a thumbs up. Doesn't always go well for me. I'm not saying it's a better map, but I just really like it. I think it's really cool. Another one at the top of the pile I think has to be Dry Arabia. It's just the standard, it's the gold standard, it's the classic, it's the one where the spawns are the most regular, you know what kind of thing you're going to be getting, and nobody can complain that they get absolutely screwed on the spawn, and it's so completely unbalanced. Yeah, some of the resources might be in the wrong place, you might have a forward gold against the Mongols, but, you know, if you're playing against a Mongol tower rush, it doesn't matter what spawn it is, that's going to be no fun for you. Unless you're the Mongol, obviously. But Dry Arabia I just think is pretty classic. There's nothing particularly special about it, but I just think it's pretty fun. Another map that I really like, so I would say maybe not as much as those ones, would be Rocky River. So, and also, I don't know why this one has slashes in it and this one's spelt wrong. We're going to adjust that as we go. Rocky River I really like because it's something where you can play a little bit defensively, but you can't completely turtle up unless you're like the English, and even then you still need to get gold. Trade is usually a fairly good possibility. If you wall up your side, you can actually get a decent trade going, but it's also relatively easy to put pressure on someone else's trade and stuff like that. So I just think it's a really nice balanced map. I like the fact that the majority of the berries and the deer and stuff is in the center, so it forces both players towards each other. It's not like all of the pocket resources are in the back corner and you can just literally hide them away and you're, you know, living your best life. It also feels really close, so I don't know if the spawn is actually closer towards the center, but it feels like it's quite easy to get to your opponent as well if you want to put pressure on. So I just find it really fun. I quite like it. I figured out the scouting path. Obviously it depends on the matchup, but I think that's pretty good. I don't usually go for the fish myself because with the ton of berries I get way more olive oil from those, so that's really the one that I would tend to go with. Just go for all the berries in the middle, put my groves at the back, and just have a great time. Now if we go down the list, I'm going to put Himeyama down here. I had it vetoed for a long time. I'm considering taking it out for the end of the season, but I've been playing it more on team games, and actually on team games I think it's quite fun, but it's just so unbelievably open, and I don't like turtle gameplay, but I do think that it's nice to be able to have the possibility to wall in a little bit, at least to direct where the conflict's going to take place. So like one wall on one side so they come from the other. Often the spawn where I had a game where I had both of my two little mini wood lines to the back and I had nowhere to wall whatsoever, and it just makes it really, really difficult to kind of block any raiding and stuff like that. And obviously, as you'll know from my gameplay, blocking knights and raiding and all of that stuff is one of the things I find very, very difficult. So that map doesn't really play to my strengths. If somebody starts booming, it's quite easy. They can put it in a really weird spot and then they can go crazy. Trade actually is pretty good on this map, especially if you play team games. I quite like that there's 4 corner maps, but for 1v1, it's just not my favourite. I just think the generation, I don't know how the game usually plays out on it. It's, yeah, a little less fun for me. So I did veto it for a while, and that's kind of where it's going to sit down in the C tier. And if you didn't see my previous video, make sure you check it out. These are all S, A, B, C and F tier, and I've just given them a fancy title, just a little Amerath twist for you. Now, one of the maps I can't quite decide on, the Bo, if you like, which is Italian for I don't know, is Gorge. It swings and roundabouts, really. Sometimes I really love it, sometimes I really hate it. I think it often depends on the matchup. It depends what my opponent's doing. Obviously, it's very open, so it's really targeted at aggression because you're very close to each other. But I played a game against Abbasid where they 3TC'd off to the back, and just hitting it was really hard, and sometimes it just doesn't feel like such a fun game to play, depending on your starting spawn. And this is one of the ones where I do agree that the spawn could be really bad. I had one game where I had berries to the front left and I had gold to the front right, and then a really back stone, which obviously isn't really what you need. And then they basically could just pressure and sit their army in between the middle of the two of them, and then I couldn't get any of those resources. And as much as a tower is a good defense, it's just not enough when your enemy is literally piling their units in and they can just run straight at all of your key resources early game. And because Byzantines takes a few minutes to get going, that, you know, made that game not a lot of fun. So in this one, I do think it's very much matchup dependent, spawn dependent. I'm not at the point where I'd veto it, but it's not going to be on top of my list. If I play custom games, I am not going to be choosing that map over some of the others. Another one I'm not so sure about at the moment would be Golden Pit. I go between liking it and hating it. Obviously, the idea of this map, as a lot of you have told me in the comments when you've watched my games on it, is do what you normally do in Feudal, get to castle, build a keep in the centre, block all of the gold, and then stop your opponent getting it because there's no trade. So the only reason I love this map, and actually I may even have to move it up. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to. It has to go there because there's no Mongols. Nobody plays Mongols on this map because there's no trade. So actually, yeah, do you know what? It can be A tier just because of the fact I know I'm not going to come up against a Mongol. Or if I am, they're going to be having a really, really bad day. So actually, that's okay. But yeah, sometimes when it gets to the point where it's encouraging lots of keep drops and stone walls and all of that stuff, it's just not the gameplay that I really like. There was a game I played on Lipany against French the other day, and they literally stonewalled half the map, put a keep in the centre, and I literally just GG'd and queued up for the next game, because the last thing I want is a 2-hour slow siege fest trying to block stone walls and both of us trading, and it's just no fun. And even if you do that, once you're at that max pop and it's just that sort of brainless unit spam, I just don't enjoy that part of the game personally. I much prefer the feudal and castle where there's little engagements here and there and stuff like that. So any map that encourages that kind of gameplay, I don't really like. You could argue Lipany is in that group, but obviously it depends on the spawn, and I tend to play a little bit more aggressively on that one depending on the matchup, so it's usually alright. And then another one that I have mixed time with but I do enjoy is Hill and Dale. So I'm going to put this one in A tier as well. So this is all about my enjoyment, not the quality of the map, but I like it because you can defend your hill relatively well, so both players have that same possibility. If you want to go for trade, there's always a trade post in the back, or sometimes they're very, very close to the center in this part here, but Usually they're next to your hill, so if your opponent starts trading, you can actually start trading yourself relatively easily. And I do like that the main resources are actually down the center, so you're forced out there and you can have it. I did have a game against English a while back, and they literally had a White Tower and a Berkshire on the front of their hill, which makes hitting their base very, very difficult, and also then securing the sacred sites I didn't manage to pull off. That was going to be my new win condition, but I think generally it's quite fun. It does feel like you're quite close to your opponent, so early on you can be quite aggressive. I've had some really nice games with Hippodrome and going horses and hitting them before they get all of the defenses up and walling and all of that stuff. So at the moment I'm enjoying it. I guess if I went against more Mongol trade on it, I probably would enjoy it less, but at the moment it seems to be pretty good. And that is the final selection of my map tier list. So overall, I actually enjoy the majority of the maps in this pool. I'm not sure exactly what I'm expecting. I don't really care about the water maps. They can pick whichever ones they want, really. I'd love to see Himeyama gone. I'd love to see Cliffside back. Now, Cliffside, I really like that. I don't want them to replace Gorge with Pit because I also hate Pit. It's kind of the same thing. I'm not a big fan of that map. That one will get vetoed immediately, but Cliffside would be fun. I actually really like Altai, if you can believe it. I just think that one's really cool. Even the one with the mountains and the little ponds and stuff, that can be quite interesting. But generally, as long as there's Lipany and Dry Arabia, I'm not too bothered about what the other ones are. I'll figure out those maps as they come. But if we can get a nice selection of these ones at the top and then switch out some of the others for some interesting changes, I think that would be really fun for Season 9. But what do you think? What's your suck it S tier Civ, and what's your for fuck's sake Civ the F at the bottom? How do you rank them, and what do you think of my selection? I'd love to know. Let me know in the comments and tell me what your personal ranking would be. But I hope you've enjoyed this tier list. If you've got any suggestions of other tier lists you'd like me to take a look at, then let me know, and I'll see you next time for some more Age of Empires analysis.